All right, mic check. 1 2 1 2 3. Trying something new with the audio. Let me know in the comments if this is better. If this is worse, something's gone terribly wrong. But I'm not ruling it out. We'll see. Hey folks, and welcome back. Now today, there's someone I'd like to introduce you to. This is Tordek, and Tordek is the first D&D mini that I ever put paint on. Now I had painted miniatures before this, sure, mostly for Blood Bowl and Mordheim. But Tordek was the first actual D&D mini that I purchased for myself and that I painted when I was about 13 or 14 years old. Now I found it recently in an old closet buried in a box, and it brought back just this flood of nostalgia and memories. But as you can see, I never finished painting it. So today, we're going to fix that mistake. Many of you might be too young to remember this, but back when this model was made, getting models wasn't so easy as it is now. The internet just wasn't a thing yet. Or it was, but not in the same way, and if you wanted to buy a mini, you had to go to the store and just hope they had what you were looking for. If you wanted, for instance, a female elf cleric, you had to just sort through blister packs and hope that they made one of those, and that your store carried it. And if you were lucky enough to find it, well, there was no, I think I'll wait for a different one, I don't like this sculpt. That was the one you got because that's what existed. And me, I actually lived way out in the middle of nowhere. So my ordeal in buying a miniature as a young man started way before that. It started with convincing my father to make what, back then, seemed like an absolutely titanic 45-minute drive to our nearest hobby shop. My father, who was absolutely not into D&D, or comics, or any other nerd stuff, really, could be convinced to do this once, maybe twice a month. And that meant bundling into the family car and spending the next 45 minutes just talking and chatting with my old man. I still remember those drives fondly, even if I don't remember the things we talked about. And at the end of the trip, there was my childhood hobby shop. The center of the small building taken up by squat tables filled with boxes of comic books. A section for baseball cards that was always filled with guys who looked just a little uncomfortable being there with all the nerd stuff. Funko Pop wasn't a thing yet, so there were action figures instead. This shop had a connection that brought in toys from the United States, including a lot of stuff we just didn't get here in Canada. And of course, a massive wall of Warhammer minis and box sets, along with a single rack of Citadel paints and brushes that, at the time I bought Tordek, came in those weird little hexagon paint pots. That's where I bought my first Mordheim and Blood Bowl models. In the back area of the cramped shop, there was a spot to play tabletop and card games, and I understand they held local tournaments there. I never got to see one because of the long drive, but I still thought it was pretty cool. And along with all that, a single rack that contained all of the fantasy minis that weren't Warhammer, D&D, and Lord of the Rings. Everything else they happened to get their hands on, all crammed onto a single rack. That's where I found Tordek. I was leafing through it while the store owner tried to make conversation with my dad. At the time, the big news shaking up the nerd world was that Dougray Scott had been cast as Wolverine for the upcoming X-Men movie. Yes, Dougray Scott, not Hugh Jackman, that would come later. We were all quite outraged at the time at the notion of someone so tall playing Wolverine. I distinctly remember the store owner trying to flatter my father, a rather short and broad man, and at the time a hobbyist bodybuilder for 20 years, by telling him that they needed someone that looked like him cast in the role. I don't think my dad was as impressed as he would have liked him to be. But eventually, I picked out my purchases. Tordek and a pot of gold paint. When my dad asked me why I'd picked that model, I remember that I told him I had ideas for how to paint the armor in a way that would look cool. Yes, young me was very excited about the ostentatious red and gold armor, which might explain why that's one of the few parts of the model I actually finished painting. Alright, I want to pause here for just a minute to talk about the future of the channel and things going forward into the new year. In short, I'm going to be opening a Patreon. Now, you might be wondering why, and that's a reasonable thing to ask. The fact is, I always take the new year as a time to refocus myself and reassess. Now, my goal for this past year for the channel, was to hit 1,000 subscribers. And thanks to you, we've done that. We've gone past that, actually, by the end of the year, which is fantastic. My goals for next year, though, are a lot bigger, both in terms of subscriber numbers and just making things better on the channel. Hopefully you're hearing some of the fruits of that right now with the audio improvements. I really hope I got this figured out, or I'm gonna look stupid. Again. But I also want to improve the visual quality, the editing, and just take on cooler projects and do more things to show you guys how to play D&D on a budget or how to expand your skill set. Now, to do that, it costs money, and that's unfortunate, but with the rising costs of literally everything these days, I have to consider how much time I put into the channel and how much time I put into other endeavors. Now, starting a Patreon is not something that I wanted to do originally, but hopefully any donations that you guys make, any subscriptions, will not only come with cool, unique benefits, but will help me do more with the channel and help things to grow. To start with, we've got our own private Discord server where you can come chat with me about hobby stuff or just about whatever else. On top of that, I'm hoping to do community voting for what videos you'd like to see in the future and even what series of videos I should start doing. I've got a whole huge list of those. Some help narrowing it down would be great. And I'm going to share pictures of things that I'm building and painting that aren't even for the channel. They're just projects I'm doing in my own time, so you can see what experiments I'm doing and what I'm up to in my own hobby life. Alright, that's all the time I'll take away from the video. Let's go back to painting over my childhood. Yeah. That shop would sadly close a few years later, largely due to changes in how both the comic industry and Citadel forced stores at the time to do their ordering. And with my only source for models and paints gone, so went my ability to practice my hobby and the start of a years-long break. But eventually there were other stores and other models, and of course, the internet eventually turned into an incredible tool for getting your hands on just about anything you could want. And later still came 3D printing. But I'll never forget how I started the hobby. Those insurmountably long drives chatting with my father, the dusty hobby shop packed full of blister packs that I had to sort through by hand to find things I could use as my characters. And finding this old Tordek model in a box in the closet brought back all of those memories. That's why I decided that even though this model doesn't really look like he should have such fancy armor, and in fact, to my eye now, he looks more like he should be a rough, grizzled adventurer and not like a regally appointed Kingsguard, I couldn't bring myself to change his paint scheme that much. It had to be red and gold, even if my modern aesthetic doesn't quite find that as interesting as I did when I was a kid. I wanted to give this model a paint job that I would have been happy with when I purchased him. Miniatures can have stories, and not just the ones that we tell with them on the tabletop. I'll never be able to look at Tordek without thinking of those long drives with my dad and that tiny shop that, at the time, seemed like one of the greatest places in the world to me. And now I've added to that story by sharing it with all of you and by repainting Tordek. Of course, I had to make one or two changes. That bronze color would have clashed with everything, and the dark green and medium yellow I had done all the cloth in got tweaked to a dark sea blue and an orange brown to fit the scheme better. But the biggest change of all is that, like his owner, Tordek is no longer a young man. He spent the last 25 years in the dark corners of a box battling dust bunnies. That ages a person. His once gloriously orange beard has taken a sharp turn toward white instead, and let's be honest, I'm sure I won't be far behind him. Thanks for coming on this journey with me, and if you're still here, then thanks for putting up with all of my reminiscing too. Please hit like and subscribe, and if you're interested in supporting the channel, then you can follow the links below to either buymeacoffee.com or to Patreon. Either way, I truly appreciate you watching, and all of your support through this past year. Going into the new year, I'll be getting back into crafting for my next video or two, and I hope you'll join me for those. As always, there is more content on the way. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.